W Biblii mowa jest o tym, że jak pisał Piotr, żadne proroctwo pisma nie podlega własnemu wykładowi. Co to oznacza? Oznacza to nic innego, że Biblia odwołuje się do Biblii oraz to, że Bóg poprzez Słowo Boże okazuje, co ma na myśli w proroctwach. Wizja proroctwa bardzo często nie jest literalna, a o wiele razy częściej jest odwołaniem do słownictwa biblijnego, przedstawionego w innym fragmencie Biblii. Innymi słowy, należy założyć, że za Słowem Bożym istnieje spójny przekaz, jak od osoby będącej stabilną umysłowo. Chyba jest rozsądne, by zakładać, że Bóg jest stabilny umysłowo. No i także, że jest osobą. Ostatnio bardzo rozpowszechnione wśród ateistów jest kłamstwo, że Biblia odwołuje się do babilońskich mitów, że pochodzi od babilońskich mitów, że zapożyczyła swoje istnienie. Może tak powiedzieć osoba niewiedząca, że niejasne prorocze wizje mają prostsze wyjaśnienie niż odwołanie do mitów babilońskich. A to wyjaśnienie po prostu znajduje się w innym fragmencie Biblii. A koincydencja pozabiblijna, jeżeli istnieje, jest przypadkowa. Ludzie po pierwsze niby mieniący się naukowcami muszą zrozumieć, że koincydencja to nie przyczynowość. A po drugie, fajnie by było, jakby nie byli ideologicznie zafiksowani, co bardzo często ma miejsce. Jest to najprostsze rozwiązanie, by uznawać, że jest pewna biblijna spójność intertekstualna, a najprostsze rozwiązanie powinniśmy brać jako najbardziej prawdopodobne według zasady tzw. brzytwy Ockhama. By uciec od tego problemu, pewne sprytne osoby, które propagują ten pomysł o mitach babilońskich, muszą mówić, by ominąć zasadę brzytwy Ockhama, że według nich Biblia nie zachowuje spójności intertekstualnej. Nie wiem osobiście, na jakich podstawach tak uważają i tak dowodzą, pewnie jedynie na podstawie autorytetu i niesprawdzonej hipotezy branej jako pewnik, znając tak zwaną ułomną metodologię nauk humanistycznych w dużej mierze. By uznać najprostsze rozwiązanie, to tak zwana ekonomia myślenia. Oczywiście nie muszę znać wszystkich babilońskich mitów, tekstów i malowideł, by się dowiedzieć, czy jest jakakolwiek nić łącząca, gdy to mam lepsze rozwiązanie, a takie słyszałem komentarze w moją stronę, że muszę wiedzieć dane babilońskie mity, wszystkie, czy może są jakieś podobieństwa. Zwyczajnie nie jestem w stanie poznać całej wiedzy świata. No ale przecież nie muszę, prawda? Mam proste, racjonalne, pasujące i zgadzające się w pełni rozwiązanie do pewnych problemów, przykładowo niezrozumienia elementów Biblii. Elementy układanki wzoru z jednej części Biblii pasują do innej. Dlatego nie muszę wiedzieć, czy wizja cherubów Ezechiela odnosi się do jakiejś tam zakrytej, ezoterycznej wiedzy znanej tylko nielicznym. Nie muszę także znać tego, czy istnieje gdzieś na świecie UFO i czy w czyjejś chorej wizji cheruby Ezechiela niby pasują do jakichś futurystycznych technologii, jakich świat jeszcze nie widział. Nie muszę także niczym Jordan Peterson odwoływać się do żonglowania słowami, nazywając Biblię misterium, czy hipertekstem, jakkolwiek by to nazwać, jak on to nazywa. Misterium odwołującym się do innego misterium, mianowicie psychoanalizy, że to jest napisane tutaj archetypy Junga. Każda osoba, interpretując niby Biblię czy proroctwa albo niejasne fragmenty, ciągnie w swoją stronę. Dziwnym przypadkiem odnoszą się oni do tajemniczości i sekretnej wiedzy tajemnej, która to jest w ich posiadaniu. Ich specjalistyczna dziedzina wiedzy, stworzona wiele tysięcy lat po Biblii, jest w stanie na to odpowiedzieć. Wydaje się to właśnie tym, co pasuje do słów Piotra jako własnej, specjalistyczno-ezoterycznej, czy też mistycznej interpretacji. Jedni widzą swoje majaki, inni widzą wszędzie jakieś nikłe nici koincydencji, inni widzą w Biblii zielone ludki, a inni widzą w niej kompleksy Edypa i inne freudyzmy. No, jakkolwiek chcecie to widzieć, to wasza sprawa. Ale wiedzcie, że albo celowo, albo niecelowo ośmieszacie Słowo Boże, a przede wszystkim robicie coś, co Biblia mówi, by nie robić. Każe ona pozbyć się widzenia tam swoich wizji w proroctwach. To nie jest wasz przekaz. To jest przekaz Boży. I trzeba go po prostu potraktować tak, jak jest spójny z innym Słowem Bożym w symbolice i słowdzictwie. Tak więc, jak twarze i koła Ezechiela symbolizują i zasadniczo co Biblia chce nam przekazać, jeżeli zinterpretuje się proroctwa tak, jak Biblia mówi, by je widzieć i ich język, odwołując się do fragmentów Biblii. Tak więc, czym są owe twarze i koło Ezechiela? Zacznijmy od twarzy żywych stworzeń w wizji Ezechiela.
I understand this to be the four faces are more likely to represent the 12 tribes of Israel, as they were instructed by God to align in the camps of the Israelites around the tabernacle. Now, we need to sidetrack here out of Ezekiel, just for a moment to get a full understanding of why I believe this. So we go back to Numbers, and the Lord, so this is Numbers 2:1, and the Lord spake unto Moses and said unto Aaron, saying, every man of the children of Israel shall pitch by his own standard with the ensign of their father's house, for far off about the tabernacle of the congregation shall they pitch. Now, the word standard is the Hebrew word digel, meaning banner. Each tribe had a banner that represented that tribe. So they had a banner, as anybody that's kind of watched Game of Thrones recently, or you would know that going into war, each house had their own banner, and their bannermen would carry their image, their depiction of what that represented their house. And each of the 12 tribes had their own banner, their own image that would represent the tribes. And each tribe had a banner that represented that tribe. However, on each side in this alignment that God had instructed the Israelites, there would be 3 tribes on each side of that 4. So the 12 tribes are split into 3. So there are 4 sets of 3 tribes. And each of those tribes, those sets of 3, had a head tribe. So on the east side were the tribes of Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. And Judah was the head tribe. That's in Numbers 2:3. And on the east side, toward the rising of the sun, shall they of the standard of the camp of Judah pitch throughout their armies. And Nushon, the son of Amminadab, shall be captain of the children of Judah and his host. And those that were numbered of them were 314,600. And those that do pitch next unto him shall be the tribe of Issachar, and Nathaniel, the son of Zuar, shall be captain of the children of Issachar, and his host. And those that were numbered thereof were 54,400. And the tribe of Zebulun, and Eliab, the son of Helon, shall be captain of the children of Zebulun, and his host. And those that were numbered thereof were 54,400. and 7,400. And that were numbered in the camp of Judah were 100,000 and fourscore thousand and 6,400 throughout their armies. These shall first set forth. Now on the south side were the tribes of Reuben, Simeon, and Gad, and Reuben being the head tribe, and that's in Numbers 2:10. I won't read all of that now, but it says, on the south side shall be the standard of the camp of Reuben, according to their armies, and the captain of children of Reuben shall be Elizur, the son of Shedeur. And then we have the numbers, and then we have the name of Simeon and Gad also represented in that south side. On the west side were the tribes of Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. And Ephraim was the head tribe of the tribes of the west side in Numbers 2:18 through. And on the west side shall be the standard of the camp of Ephraim according to their armies. And that goes through until verse 24. And on the north side were the tribes of Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. Dan was the head tribe of those tribes of the north. Numbers 2:25, and the standard of the camp of Dan shall be on the north side of their armies. So according to rabbinic tradition, Judah is represented by a lion. Ephraim is represented by an ox, Reuben by a head or human head, and Dan by an eagle or a serpent. Now these match the four faces of the cherubim. So the main banner of each side, so the south, north, east, and west, the main tribe, the banner is represented by a lion, ox, a head, and an eagle. So it is very possible that we don't have direct scripture which would depict these specific representations, but we do have scriptures that would at least support them. It is possible that these cherubim represent those four leading tribes. Now, if we go to Judah, it is referred to as a lion in Genesis 49:9. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, thou art gone up. He stooped down. He couched as a lion, and as an old lion, who shall rouse him up? Reuben means, behold, a son or man. Genesis 29:32. And Leah conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Reuben. For she said, surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction. Now, therefore, my husband will love me. So it is like, it means son. Ephraim is represented by a bull or an ox, Deuteronomy 33:17. His glory is like the firstling of his bullock, and his horns are like the horns of a unicorn. With them he shall push the people together to the ends of the earth, and they are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh. Bullock being the Hebrew shor, which means a bull or an ox. And Dan means a judge. Genesis 36, and Rachel said, God has judged me, and has also heard my voice, and has given me a son. Therefore called she his name Dan, because she's been judged. Now the eagle is often used as a depiction of divine judgment. For example, in Deuteronomy 28:49. The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. So The divine judgment is represented by that eagle. Now, verse 6 also tells us that each cherubim had 4 wings. So it just says Ezekiel 1:6, and everyone had 4 faces, and everyone had 4 wings. In verse 9, we are told that the cherubim never turn when they went in that direction. Their wings were joined one to another. They turned not when they went every one straight forward. Now, the meaning of that is that in whatever direction they went, they would always have one face facing that way. And so it would always appear that 2 wings would be outstretched. And so if you imagine that the head of the face, the man is this way, then we've on this side, it's not the side of a face, it's an ox, and this side is the eagle, and at the back it's the lion, so it's the face. So whichever way they are facing, there is always a face facing that way. Now, Rashi stated they did not turn when they walked. If they wished to walk in any desired direction, they did not need to turn their faces, because they have faces on every side. Therefore, each one went in the direction of his face, in the direction of the face on that side where they desired to go. They would go, and that's Rashi on Ezekiel. Now, when we look back at the cherubim that were at each end of the mercy seat in the tabernacle, the cherubim were depicted as having 2 wings in 1 Kings 6:23 through 28. Now, it is very likely that one of each of the 4 faces were represented in each direction. So there are 4 angels, and so when the 4 angels are facing straight on, each one would have a different face. So you would have the 4 faces: the man, the eagle, the lion, and the ox, all on the different angel or cherubim. Now, regardless of which way you looked at them, they would, and each creature, it is described as each creature had a wheel next to it in Ezekiel 1:15. Now, as I behold the living creatures, behold, one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures with his 4 faces. Now, what, as I explained in when I did those the depiction of what the heavenly beings look like, the wheel inside the wheel is very misunderstood, I think, and often you'll see like a flat wheel with another wheel inside of it, and that's the kind of depiction that often this is the kind of image that most people understand it. But I kind of understand it as in like a cross shape, but because they're circular, it kind of almost forms like a sphere shape. So it doesn't matter which way they go around, and I did show a picture of that as well. So it wouldn't matter which way they went; it would still be going around, but it wouldn't need to rotate in order to move in that direction. Now, each wheel had, like I say, a wheel inside of it. And so, like I say, that's how I understand it. Two interlocking wheels that form kind of that cross shape. So the wheels are kind of being described as omnidirectional, so they don't need to change. It's almost like a ball shape. They don't need to change. The cherubim don't need to change direction. So the throne is doesn't matter which way that it's moving, it doesn't need to change. So it's kind of like representation that God doesn't change. It just moves in that direction. It looks exactly the same in each direction, and there's no need for God to change the way that he is in order to move in a certain direction. And I kind of understand it being that kind of meaning. And so this, like I say, it represents God's ability to move. Now, unlike before, where God was understood to dwell only in the temple in Jerusalem, that was kind of where God dwelt. Here, the chariot is being depicted as being mobile, and not only mobile, but with the ability to go in any direction, yet always remaining the same. Now, it is that mobility that is important to Ezekiel's full teaching. God is the God of everywhere. In Jeremiah 23:23, I am God at hand, saith the Lord, and not a God afar off. And the importance of that can't be underestimated or understated. While the Jews would be carried off into exile in Babylon, and the temple was going to be destroyed, God was still with them. He would not allow them to be totally destroyed. He would follow them into the exile, and eventually bring them back out of that exile. He was going to go with them. And that's that mobility, is that he isn't just in the temple. He is able to move, and he will go wherever they go, and he will be with them. Now we find in Isaiah 51, thus saith the Lord, where is the bill of your mother's divorcement? Whom have I put away? Of which of my creditors is it to whom I have sold you? Behold, for your iniquities have ye sold yourselves, and for your transgressions is your mother put away. So God is basically saying that you've been put away because of the iniquities of you, but I have not divorced you. I have not given up, basically, on you. I won't give up on you. And while you will be sold into captivity, basically taken into captivity, you did this yourselves because of your iniquities, but I am going to be with you. And so they were going to have to suffer the consequences of what they did and of their iniquities, but still God was going to, the Jewish people would return, and God would not completely destroy them. And that was something that was meant to kind of give the Israelites, the Jewish people, throughout time. They've been told many times by God that they're going to be punished for their iniquities and following after other nations and other gods and stuff. But God has made a promise. God made a promise to Abraham that his seed through eventually would come through. So it would go through Isaac, Jacob, and through that lineage. So that promise of the Messiah, that of Jesus, was always going to come to fulfillment. And so the Jewish nation could not ever be totally destroyed. Now, Ezekiel describes the rings, the rims of the wheels, as being so high that they were dreadful. They were fearful, for their height was so great, in Ezekiel 1:18. As for their rings, they were so high that they were dreadful, and their rings were full of eyes round about them four. So the rims of the wheels were full of eyes. Now, unlike the assertion by some that these eyes actually mean stars, and this is total misunderstanding of what these eyes represent. And you'll see sometimes in depictions of these the wheels, the rims, they've got stars in them, and this is a total misrepresentation. They are eyes. It means eyes. The Hebrew ayin, which means eye, it appears 887 times in the Bible, and it never once refers to stars, or in context does it ever refer in relation to stars. There is no biblical support for that claim. It means eyes. It is full of eyes. Ezekiel 1:19, and when the living creatures went, the wheels went by them. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. Whithersoever the spirit was to go, they went thither, and their spirit to go. And the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. When those went, these went. And when those stood, these stood. And when those were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. The eyes represented the ability of God to see in all directions, something that Ezekiel addresses, saying that the Israelites' iniquity was great, and that the Israelites said that God could not see. Ezekiel 9:9. Then said he unto me, the iniquity of the house of Israel and Judah is exceedingly great, and the land is full of blood, and the city full of perverseness. For they say, the Lord hath forsaken the earth, and the Lord seeth not. So the Israelites believed, or they thought they could do whatever they wanted because they were God's people, and that God was no longer in the earth. He had forsaken the earth, and that he didn't see. And so these eyes, which are in the wheels, which face in any direction, represent God's ability to always see, to see everything in all directions. There is no hiding. Further biblical attestation can be found throughout the Bible. Proverbs 15:3, the eyes of the Lord are in every place, holding the evil and the good. Eyes here is the Hebrew ayin, which is exactly the same as what we get eyes in the wheels. Hebrews 4:13, neither is there any creature that is not manifest in his sight, but all things are naked and opened unto the eyes of him with whom we have to do. Jeremiah 16:17, for mine eyes are upon all their ways. They are not hid from my face, neither is there iniquity hid from mine eyes. So God is basically stating, it doesn't matter what you do, I can see it. You can't hide your iniquity from God. And I could quote many, many other verses where that depiction of God being able to see everything. Ezekiel then describes the firmament above the heads of the cherubim, which was the color of terrible crystal. Ezekiel 1:22, and the likeness of the firmament upon the heads of the living creature, and was the color of terrible crystal, stretched forth over their heads above. Now, crystal being the Hebrew kerach, which means frost or ice, and terrible being yar, meaning fear. The firmament being a fearful, awesome crystal ice color. Now, the sound of the winds like great waters, as the voice of the Almighty. That's what Ezekiel says in 1:24. And when they went, I heard the noise of their wings, like the noise of great waters, as the voice of the Almighty, the voice of speech, as the noise of an host. When they stood, they let down their wings. Now we get the same comparison in John's vision in Revelation 1:15. And his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. So that's the same as in Ezekiel. Then came a voice from the firmament, Ezekiel 1:25. And there was a voice from the firmament that was over their heads when they stood and had let their wings down. Now Ezekiel saw the likeness of the throne. Again, this is just the form of. Ezekiel is very clear to repeat the words likeness and appearance. It would seem that he wants to emphasize that this is not to be in any way taken to be literal image, but simply the resemblance of. So there is an understanding with what the visual representation means, but it's not to be taken that this is what the literal throne of God would look like. What Ezekiel saw are nothing more than symbolic representations of what I think that I'm explaining in this. In verse 26, we are told that the throne had the appearance of sapphire stone. Ezekiel 1:26, and above the firmament that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne, or as the appearance of a sapphire stone. Now this sapphire color is also what Aaron, Nadab and Abihu and the 70 of the elders saw back in Exodus 24 upon the mountain, Mount Sinai. Exodus 24:10. And they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet, as it were a paved work of a sapphire stone, and as it were the body of heaven in the clearness. There was a figure that looked like a man above the throne in verse 26, and upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above upon it. Again, this must not be taken as Ezekiel literally seeing God upon the throne. Ezekiel yet again reiterates likeness and appearance. So, and upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above upon it. Ezekiel only actually saw the lower part of the man that sat on the throne. He describes this as having the appearance of fire and the brightness around about it in verse 27. And I saw as the color of amber, as the appearance of fire around about within it, from the appearance of the loins even upward, and from the appearance of his loins even downwards. I saw as it were the appearance of fire, and it had brightness round about. Now the Hebrew word Naga literally means brightness. And at the end of the vision, Ezekiel recognized that what he saw was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord, Yahweh, and fell on his face. In verse 28, as the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud in the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness round about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face, and I heard a voice of one that spake. So again, we have a reference to the brightness, which Ezekiel compares to a rainbow in the sky on a rainy day. And this was the likeness of the glory of the Lord. Now, if you see other images throughout the Old Testament, there's a lot of brightness, and especially when we're talking about the glory of the Lord. And this kind of represents that shine, that brightness. Is almost like the whiteness comes across as being pure, and that the complete brightness of God being totally and utterly beyond representation of pureness. Now we should take note of the reference to the fire. The fire represents the very presence of God. We are told in both the Old Testament and the New Testament that God is a consuming fire. Deuteronomy 4:24, for the Lord thy God is a consuming fire, even a jealous God. And that is quoted or again referred to in Hebrews in the New Testament in 12:29. For our God is a consuming fire. God descended out of Mount Sinai in a fire, Exodus 19:18, and Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in a fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. The sight of God's glory on Mount Sinai was like a devouring fire, Ezechiel 24:17, and the sight of the glory of the Lord was like devouring fire on top of the mount in the eyes of the children of Israel. We must also note that the image of the cherubim themselves had come from the midst of the fire, Ezekiel 1:4, and I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it. And out of the midst thereof, the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. The whole vision that Ezekiel saw was in the fire of the presence of God. In the book of Isaiah, there are a couple of very specific questions that are asked. Who can dwell with the devouring fire? And who shall dwell with everlasting burnings? Isaiah 33:14. The sinners of Zion are afraid. Fearfulness hath surprised the hypocrites. Who among us shall dwell with the devouring fire? Who among us shall dwell with everlasting burnings? Now the answer, which is given in the very next verse, might surprise many people, especially those that believe in a literal hell and burning and torture in the fires of hell. It is those that walk righteously and speak uprightly that will dwell with the fire. God is that fire. God is the consuming fire. And it is the righteous that will dwell with that fire. Isaiah 33:15. He that walketh righteously and speaketh uprightly, he that despiseth the gain of oppressions, that shaketh his hands from holding of bribes, that stop his ear from hearing of blood, and shuts his eyes from seeing evil. It is God's very presence that is the fire that consumes, but it consumes the wicked and not the righteous. Only the righteous can dwell within God's presence. God's presence is shown in the burning bush, Exodus 3:2. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. The bush represented the righteousness. It was not consumed. The righteous will not be consumed in the fire. When we go to Daniel 7:10, we get the image of the river of fire, which again represents God's very presence, and those that stood in front of him are judged. Daniel 7:10, and a fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands and thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. It is the unrighteous, the wicked, that will be destroyed in the lake of fire, which is the very presence of God. Only the righteous can survive in his presence. God's very presence will be what destroys the wicked. Now, Ezekiel's vision symbolizes the Lord's presence upon his throne, which is this fire representation. But it is also important to understand why Ezekiel was given this vision. Ezekiel was called by God to go unto the children of Israel, who God referred to as a rebellious nation. Ezekiel 2:1. And he said unto me, Son of man, stand upon thy feet, and I will speak. And he spake unto me, and said, Set me upon my feet, that I heard him that spake unto me. And he said unto me, Son of man, I send thee to the children of Israel to be to a rebellious nation that hath rebelled against me. They and their fathers have transgressed against me, even unto this very day. Ezekiel was given a number of visual representations to give to the Israelites to depict the coming destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. In chapter 4 of Ezekiel, he was instructed by God to lie on his left side for 390 days to represent the iniquity of the house of Israel, and then on his right side for 40 days to represent the iniquity of the house of Judah. Each day represented 1 year. Now, by doing this, he was predicting the destruction of Jerusalem. Ezekiel 4:4. Lie thou also upon thy left side, and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel upon it, according to the number of the days that thou shalt lie upon it. Thou shalt bear their iniquity. For I have laid upon you the years of their iniquity, according to the number of the days, 390 days. So shalt thou bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. So Ezekiel had to lie on his side to bear the iniquity of the house of Israel 390 days to represent 1 year for all of their iniquity, 390 years of iniquity. And when thou have accomplished them, lie again on their right side, and thou shalt bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have appointed thee each day for a year. Therefore thou shalt set thy face toward the siege of Jerusalem, and thine arm shall be uncovered, and thou shalt prophesy against it. And behold, I will lay bands upon thee, and thou shalt not turn thee from one side to another, till thou hast ended the days of thy siege. Now, it's important to know that Jeremiah had predicted the destruction of Jerusalem, as we've already stated. However, after the first wave of Israelites were taken to Babylon, the city and the temple still remained. This led many Israelites to actually believe that the destruction of the temple would not happen as it was foretold by Jeremiah. They actually believed that it was not going to happen because it hadn't happened. And after that first wave in which Ezekiel was taken, they believed that that was it. That was the full realization of what Jeremiah was actually depicting. Now, the siege of Jerusalem was because of their idolatry. But Ezekiel continued to preach the forthcoming destruction with the proclamation that it would happen so that they, the Israelites, would know that he was the Lord. Yet God promised to save a remnant of Israel, as we know that he has to save a remnant of Israel in Ezekiel 6:8. Yet I will leave a remnant, that ye may have some that shall escape the sword among the nations, when ye shall be scattered through the countries. And this is also found in chapter 11. Before the city was destroyed, Ezekiel saw the glory of the Lord leave the temple in Ezekiel 10:18. Then the glory of the Lord departed from off the threshold of the house and stood over the cherubims. And the cherubims lifted up their wings and mounted up from the earth in my sight when they went out. The wheels also were beside them, and every one stood at the door of the east gate of the Lord's house. And the glory of the Lord the God of Israel was over them above. The glory then left the city entirely in Ezekiel 11:22. Then did the cherubims lift up their wings, and the wheels beside them, and the glory of the God of Israel was over them above. And the glory of the Lord went up from the midst of the city and stood upon the mountain, which is on the east side of the city. Afterwards, the Spirit took me up and brought me in a vision by the Spirit of God into Chaldea, to them of the captivity. So the vision that I had seen went up from me. Then I spoke unto them of the captivity all the things that the Lord had showed me. So we see that the glory of the Lord, which was always in the temple, was now leaving the temple, and then it left the city. It left Jerusalem. And this was to show that God was no longer protecting Jerusalem and the people in the city, and that destruction was going to come upon them. He'd left, and so that destruction, that temple, this is the first temple, remember, that first temple was now free to be destroyed because God was no longer in it. He was no longer protecting it. And that's really important, that God's protection over the city had left. He was no longer residing in the city as that understanding of God residing in the city. Now, it is not long after this that the city, along with the temple, was destroyed, and the southern tribes, the house of Judah, was taken into captivity into Babylon. Now, Ezekiel does continue to prophesy, and he prophesied that the nations would be judged, which obviously does happen to Babylon, and they do return. He prophesied about the restoration of the temple and the return of God's glory to the temple, and then obviously we know that the Babylonians were later destroyed, and the Israelites, that southern tribes from that captivity, returned back to Jerusalem, and the second temple was then built. Okay, so basically that is my understanding of what the vision of Ezekiel actually represents.